Hello and welcome to OEG Live. I'm Alan Levine and I'm running the show today, but I'm really not in charge of anything. But I'm really excited to bring you this project that I've been following from Dan McGuire and Catherine Cure are here with us to tell us all about this amazing effort that's going on with putting OER to use for elementary learning in Africa. And so I'm not going to try to explain it, but we're just going to have a casual conversation here. And this, of course, will be recorded. And first of all, sadly disappointed that we can't make this work at the conference next week for OE Global, but this is sort of a way to open things up. And so, hello and welcome. I'll start. I'm going to start with Catherine. Dan comes first, but Catherine, it's great to have you here, tuning in from South Africa and in a very interesting location, right?
Yes, I'm in a guest house in the Groot Mariko, so we're in the Northwest Province. So I'm having to borrow Ethernet. It's 36 degrees today, so yeah, it's a fairly 36 degrees Celsius. What's that in Fahrenheit, Dan?
Hot.
Upper 90s, probably.
Very hot. Very hot. That's why I'm sort of, yeah. So, but thank you. It's wonderful to be here. And I guess it's this kind of remote area with, we have issues with electricity as well as with Wi-Fi connectivity. And those are exactly the kinds of problems that the MoodleBox has been designed to solve in terms of the challenges of being in poor areas with a lack of resources. And I was incredibly blessed that Dan called me and said, hey, I've got this project already going in Ghana. Would you like to join us in South Africa and bring South Africa on board? So it was just really very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really keen to learn about MoodleBox. I've followed a little bit from Dan, but can you tell us about the STEAM Foundation that is your organization?
Seed funded by Siemens Stiftung, which is the German-based nonprofit. We've always had a very strong focus on science education in under-resourced schools. And what we find is that the context between the Global South and the Global North is so very, very different that solutions for the Global North are just not applicable in the Global South. So we loved the concept. We loved how they looked at hands-on experimentation, but we've been really trying to ensure that we solve it in terms of enabling very strong lesson plans for teachers, where we consider our teacher to be our first learner. And then obviously during the pandemic, we pivoted to online. And then we've been looking at various LMSs and more sort of blended learning approaches. But one of our key problems is that it just breaks down when you are now dealing with a remote area with intermittent electricity, with little to no cellular signal. You might be in areas where there's literally no mobile signal. So how do you do that? And then obviously that's where the MoodleBox and its promise comes into play, that you can run it off a power bank. Obviously, somewhere along the line, you need data and connectivity, but it can be that the teacher uses the cell phone, downloads, puts it onto the MoodleBox, and then the MoodleBox basically, which is a credit card sized, Raspberry Pi, it's basically a portable server, and then it's its own little Wi-Fi. There we go. Dan's got one. And in South Africa, we've also, as you can see, we're 36 degrees, and we're not one of the hottest places in Africa. So the case that we bought has a little fan as well, so that we can sort of work with it. But we've been, looking at all the different challenges around that, and this really is very, very exciting in terms of its promise, because obviously not every school is like that. But if we cannot solve for the poorest and least resourced schools, then you cannot actually scale to the whole country. And those are the schools with the greatest need for equipment, often the logistics of getting there. We've got a lot of mountainous terrain. We've got river crossings. I mean, when we've delivered books or in other projects, you've had to get 4x4s with, river crossing capabilities and mountain, whereas something like this really solves a lot of those challenges, and we now having to get it to work within the country.
This is so exciting. And so we're going to see more, hopefully, and learn more about this. And Dan, thank you for showing the box. I've been eager to see one. But hello and welcome. You're OE artist. I love that title, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, the title I will credit to my wife, Casey. We were on a walk one day and she says, you know, how do I tell people what you do? No, nobody understands that. And I started, so it's all about, she said, well, are you then kind of like an OE artist? I said, well, yeah, I kind of like that. Let's go with that. So I really do like that. Anyway, um, so I've been doing professional development for teachers relative to the use
Mhm,
of a digital tools, specifically open source learning management systems, and then added in OER in about 2011. And I've been doing that all through the pandemic. But what was really interesting was a little over a year ago when I started exploring the MoodleBox, this device that I just held up, which is a version of Moodle, which is the
mhm,
learning management system, which is most widely used all across the globe. Um, the Open
mhm,
University in UK uses it. Most of the universities in South Africa use it. It's used by universities all over the world. And as Catherine so nicely put it, we do have to though solve for those who have the least resources. And so that's what the Moodle box does. So
mhm,
I was looking at that and trying to figure out how it works and how we can apply it. And I happened on LinkedIn to meet up with Peter Amawabil, who lives in Tamale, Ghana. And he has started several years ago a nonprofit to acquire resources for his school and the neighboring schools in his northern suburb part of Tamale. And I we connected and I chatted. I said, "Would you be interested in looking at maybe using this technology device?" And he said, "Yes, let's try it." And it's just been delightful working with him. He's an incredible, talented, innovative teacher that is just so dedicated. And he has helped me learn how to apply this in classrooms. So
mhm,
we've built this over the year, and we we as Catherine pointed out, we tried various devices. But one of the issues we struggled with is what was the best device to use with students in the to
mhm,
access um, the Moodle box in the classroom. And we ended up after experimenting with cell phones and various other and laptops, settling on a 10-inch tablet, which we were able to acquire in Tamale.
mhm,
And um, then so we developed that device, and then I started showing Peter how to add content onto the Moodle box so the students could access it. And we then found African Storybook, which is a phenomenal organization
mhm,
that was founded by SADI, the South African Institute for Distance Education, several years ago. And it's probably one of the largest OER repositories that lots of people at OE Global don't know about, primarily because it's all
mhm,
early literacy, primary books, picture books.
mhm, mhm,
Um, but we're able to download those, put them on the Moodle box, and um, the students loved seeing them. They're bright in color. And then Peter found that on African Storybook, they actually have books in Dagbani. I'd never heard of the Kingdom of Dagban, which has been in existence for many
mhm,
centuries, and it's the area around Tamale, and all of the people in that area speak Dagbani. Well, that's their first language, and he was able to find books on African Storybook in Dagbani, which he was able to put onto the Moodle box. So now the students are looking at their mother tongue on in books
mhm,
on their devices, which is phenomenal for them. I mean, these are students who had never had a device in their hands, who their families don't own electronic devices. There is not internet available in the area. So
mhm,
now when these fifth graders can look at their their mother tongue on their own devices, this is like a wow. This is this is big. Not only that, but we can take the books that are on African Storybook in English and translate them into Dagbani. So that's just a matter of finding. I tried it in. I tried doing it with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT doesn't get Dagbani. So we're relying on people to do the translating. But and then we go on to add assessments, because that's one of the things about the learning management systems, is that you can also add assessments. Because as a teacher, we know that just presenting the book to the student is only the first step. Has the student actually read the book? Do they understand it? What are their misunderstandings as they're reading the book? This is true at every level of education. We have to find out what the student understands. So we use the assessment tools in the learning management system to do that. Because it's open source and because the content is all OER, we can translate it into Dagbani. The teacher can modify it for the specific needs of their students. We don't have to rely on, the legacy publishers to provide us with the assessment. The teacher can do that. And I'll show you an example of that at some point here too, how we can actually do that. But I'll pause and let you ask a question.
I just think it's worth explaining this situation that exists in Ghana and South Africa of as I understand it, of mandating education in local languages, which is commendable, but leaving teachers to figure it out on their own. And so what do teachers typically do when they're forced to do this, and what are they able to do now?
Catherine, do you want to speak to that a bit?
I can't. Sure. I can't really speak so much for the Ghanaian situation, but in South Africa, we have 11 different official languages. And only quite recently have we really realized the impact of not starting in your in your mother tongue. We also and the importance of that. So the reality is there are publishing books out there, but again, you've got issues of logistics, distribution, access in terms of accessibility, in terms of price point, and so on. And that is where something like being able to take a digital book, because with one MoodleBox you can have 100 books, 200 books. There are organizations like Book Dash as well, which is very is translating into mother tongues, and Storyweaver. But again, if you're wanting, they come as straight storybooks. They're not going to be using a learning management system and so on. So yes, there is a big deficit. And I think in the presentation, Dan, it was something like 43% of households in South Africa don't even have a single book. So if you are, that is a massive problem, and we see it now, impacting on the literacy and the literacy levels, that we are not performing as well as we should in terms of PEARLS, TIMS, all of the international standardized tests. And there is now a big drive, especially in the early years. And up until recently, your kindergarten year was your creches, your early education centers were actually handled by the Department of Social Development. We had lots of small centers with not necessarily women who were particularly predominantly women, obviously. And now that's recently been incorporated within the Department of Basic Education. So kindergarten was never a formal year of schooling. It was often being run by a lot of independent people in groups. And this just highlights how critical those early literacy books are. And I know it's a similar situation with the 11 languages in Ghana as well. Dan?
Same. Interesting that there's the same number. Both Ghana and South Africa have 11 official languages. And English is one of the in both countries. So and as Peter has pointed out, I said, well, doesn't the Department of Education send you books? And he said, well, yeah, sometimes. Send us 10 books. And rarely in Dagbani because as a practical matter, how is a country, the Department of Education in a country that's struggling to, meet its basic needs in some cases, how are they going to afford to print large quantities of books in 11 different languages? I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost going to be hard to do if they had the money. As Catherine pointed out, then delivering them becomes an issue. So digital LMSs really address a huge problem. And that's true of all over Africa, and it's also true in South Asia and lots of places in the world where the literacy people are figuring out that it's better to teach kids, as Catherine pointed out, in their mother tongue first, how to read, and then introduce the dominant official language of the government. Then we have multilingual kids, which is what we want. But trying to force them to learn a new language as they're learning this concept of, well, CAT means cat. Well, what's a cat if that's not in your language? It's sort of obvious when you think about it, but we've been doing it the wrong way for many years.
Exactly. Well, let's you're
And I
going to
think,
give us a little. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
yeah. No, I think one of the other things I'm wanting to highlight is that English is about as non-transparent a language as you get. Most of your African languages or Afrikaans, what you read is what you say. You don't have said spelt, said should be SED, not SAID. So so you've got the complexity of English being the dominant language, or the lingua franca, as it were, of the world, but now it's an extraordinarily difficult language even for a first language English speaker to learn to read and write, because it's just grabbed every noun from every other country in the world, and not so it's a very non-transparent language, and that just adds to the complexity. So now you're having to learn a different language from your mother tongue, and it's non-transparent. So your capacity to learn quite quickly is obviously impacted. And what's been really exciting, I was recently at a NASCI conference, the National Association for Social Change Entities in Education, and the University of Stellenbosch, their RECEP group, RESEP, have actually created a template for working out at the end of, let's say, kindergarten or grade 1, if you isiXhosa or isiZulu, how many words should you have mastered? And they actually went all the way back to scratch, and they've created a very exciting methodology for understanding, because, the funders who are coming in are saying, well, okay, so in mother tongue, what should we be expecting? What are the benchmarks? How do we assess the child? How many words should they have mastered, and so on. So one of the women involved in the research gave us a very exciting presentation, which really, and what was interesting was that, again, it's a global South solution. It's got nothing, they said these methodologies will not work in this country, and they went all the way back down to scratch, and they've created a whole new template. So that's exciting. Yes.
All right. So let's, if you don't mind, Dan, let's get a sense about how this all works. You're going to do a little bit of screen sharing demo, right?
Sure. Happy to. I'd love to.
All right.
Yes. So this is obviously The Lion Runs and Cow Walks. It's a first-year reading book that is popular all over the world. This one is actually written in Cambodia, I think, by the South Asia, and it's been translated into lots of different languages. I'll just run through it real quick here. So the lion runs, cow walks, nut goes in water. All right. So obviously this is very concrete animals, things, water, air, wood, the things we want to teach students in the beginning. Now, we took this book, and we worked with ChatGPT, and I asked Nimvoya for some help in fixing it. And this is what it looks like when you translate it into isiXhosa. All right. We just had to reformat it a little bit, but again, it shows up pretty much the same. I'm not going to try to pronounce those words, but anyway. All right. So, but now we have that. That's actually how easy it is, really. Again, we just need to have a few, you know, thankfully we have Navoya to translate this and make it right. And we're working with limited languages, but it's a pattern and it's a model that I think we can expand on and use in other places. We've done the same thing with Dagbani in Ghana. I don't actually have one of those to pull up for you. But now let me jump to the other capabilities of the MoodleBox that I'd like to show you. So, okay, so now, first question is, this says, name the insect. So this is actually, we're using the STEM concepts. This is science. We're naming insects. And which, when we're talking about the R level, which is what Navoya calls her kindergarten for reception year, which is a term I actually like. So it says name the insect. So the MoodleBox, and this is a feature that's available both in Moodle and on MoodleBox. There's a capability of, let's see, if I play this, could you hear that audio?
No, I think we didn't get the shared audio, but
okay,
we can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, but that was my voice trying to say this word, umakula. The point is that the student is able to, so the question is name the insect, and so they get an audio prompt. And so now what we're asking them to do is say, which one of these words did I just say? And they choose this one, and they get this prompt. So, and if I click that, it's actually there. That's going to say, we're very proud of you. Good choice. And so they get an audio prompt for confirming that they got the answer right. Now, what's I think very important here is because this is OER, the content on here, I created this in my voice, but we want the teachers to create it in their voice, because obviously the kids in the Western Cape are going to respond better, I think, to their teacher's voice than, an old grandfather from Minnesota. Grandfather type. I don't actually have grandkids yet, but I think that'll work. But the point is, the teacher gets to choose. The teacher could hire an actor to do it if they want, if the department will pay for it, of course. But the key is that they get voice prompts, they get voice confirmation on their choice, and then we can do some video prompts too. Here's the same thing. How many? I don't know if you can say that, Catherine. That's the isiXhosa word for butterfly. This probably makes as much sense as butterfly does for a name of this animal.
It's a bit small for me to see.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, it's something like Amababahatan, But and here's where I try to pronounce that. And again, so this is what happens if the student answers wrong. The question is, how many of them are there? So the answer is there's 1, 2. So the student answers 3. No, that's 3. And the correct answer, and we can give them a prompt. If I played this, this would be that's a video response of me saying, whoops, you'll have to try a different one. So the R-level students get audio prompts, video prompts. All of these things then can be recreated by their teacher in the classroom using the teacher's own face and voice to do that. This is one of the really powerful tools of being able to use the MoodleBox, because these are all tools that are built into the MoodleBox. There's no additional
Yeah.
Nothing needs to be added.
So everything that you can do in Moodle in terms of this interaction is run off of the MoodleBox locally. Yeah.
Yep. So it's incredibly powerful, and it
It
provides
te-
all the
yeah.
resources.
The one thing, the MoodleBox tends not to allow the plugins because obviously it's quite small. So they do prefer no plugins, though you are finding that Moodle itself is starting to look at, we had a Moodle Moot in South Africa recently, which was very exciting, which I attended. And there, the founder was saying that they are looking at their most popular plugins and trying to incorporate them into core Moodle, because if it's that popular and that used, then it really should be part of the platform. So there is that distinction that, you might, that there are some functionalities around plugins that you've got to be aware of, but hopefully the most important ones will be incorporated in future.
And also, is it doing the full, keeping track of what individual students are doing in terms? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things we've done in Ghana is pull up student achievement reports. We've created some math quizzes there too. So Peter can actually pull up and create a Excel spreadsheet of how well each of his individual students are doing on the math quizzes that he's been giving them. And I'm going to bet that the people in Accra that are visiting his classroom probably haven't seen that in Accra. I think he's leading, doing some cutting edge stuff.
Right. And then I know a big piece of the project is the professional development for teachers, so they can. So if I'm a teacher in a remote area with my MoodleBox, I can do some of these changes that you're describing in terms of
all of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's
fantastic.
That's the point of the professional development.
Yeah.
Is that we show them how to create a quiz, how to make the modifications, how to add content, how to add quizzes. It's not rocket science, but again, we're talking about elementary teachers who have anywhere from 20 to, in some cases, 40 students in their room, and they're of course, like everywhere in the world, overworked and underpaid. So whatever support we can give them to be able to do this, and as Catherine was saying, in some places in South Africa, and it's true all over, but that the amount of work we're requiring of our teachers for these to introduce the future students of the world to literacy, we're kind of doing it wrong. I think we need to provide more support. The more support we can provide, the better off everybody's going to be.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, this is probably I don't know if it's even possible, but let's say I've done some of these customizations as a teacher. Wouldn't they be of interest to others? Is there some way of organizing all of this content into? I see all the head nodding, so I'll stop and you'll answer.
Well, I guess that's part of the MoodleNet project to enable sort of a repository of not only open education resources, but also put into an LMS that are then available for anyone worldwide to use, and adapt obviously as need be. I mean, that's the whole point of open education, isn't it?
Yeah, there's it's MoodleNet.
Yeah.
So just to confuse people, we have Moodle, which is the learning management system. MoodleBox is the version of Moodle designed for a small server, remote server. MoodleNet is the repository that Moodle and Martin Dugiamas has created to store OER content. And if you pull up MoodleBox to show people, it's still in it. They're still building it out, but it's possible to add things to it right now. You can sort for things and search things. And one of the nice things about MoodleNet is that if you're using Moodle, you can add it to your course with a click, 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 boom,
Mhm.
it's in your course. That's it. That's all you have to do. I think it's 3 clicks.
Mhm.
Now, if you're in the US or Canada and using something other than Moodle, you can still download the content
Mhm.
and upload it to your LMS, presuming that the proprietary LMS people have given you the ability to do that. It's still possible to do. You just need to have the permissions to do it.
Right. And just because people might ask, like, are there Creative Commons licenses on this content or other kind of things which make
Of
this
course.
sharing apparent? Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily on
Yes.
these test
Yeah.
courses that we put up here, but yeah, everything is CC
Mhm.
licensed.
Fantastic. And so
Correct.
obviously,
And with the
go ahead.
I was going to say with the appropriate license that is OER, because not all CC licenses are. If it's ND, it's no derivatives, which means you
Yeah.
can't even translate. So yes,
Yeah.
it has to be the correct one. In fact, at the moment, I've still got. I'm waiting for some a previous work that I did where I'm asking them to relicense it as OER, and they initially wanted to license. Anyway, so there's a lot of we're trying to get content that is either copyright or is under a Creative Commons license, but which isn't OER, to be re-released under a license that enables us to use it in this environment. So hopefully I'm going to get some good news on that soon. So because that is the big issue, is that there are a lot of nonprofits or education departments out there for whom copyright is just an automatic, unthinking application. It's not really, it's like, okay, that's what you do with your material. So there's a lot of conversations I'm having around in South Africa, including with the tax authority, to try and get those repositories released as open education resources so that we all can benefit, not just the few schools, or even if it's a lot of schools who've benefited. But yes, it is a requirement with the project that we can only work with such materials. I mean, it's
Right.
illegal otherwise, really. That's the last thing any funder wants is that risk. No.
But that brings up one of the other issues is just the promotion of this whole concept. OER is still a secret for too many people in the world, especially when we're talking about K-12. Now, OER has tended to operate only in higher ed so far, for the most part.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think is a fair thing to say, but that's only at the most 20% of the population of students, and maybe Catherine's got some numbers where it's even less than that. But you said at one point it's
one out of 13, 1/13.
Yeah. So
here we'll do the math.
Yeah, but so
I'm quickly doing that.
So far, we haven't even really gotten to the students in the world. We're just dealing with the tip of the iceberg or the low-hanging fruit, whatever metaphor you want to. We need to get to the large group. So if we want to actually promote OER, let's actually start where the students start. We start them out in kindergarten. It'll be a no-brainer by the time they get to higher ed. They'll have to use OER.
And I think what you've done is replicable in other places that need this. So are you already working or thinking of other parts of the world that you might put this into play?
Yeah, we're actually having conversations. I got off the phone an hour ago with a person in Kenya, where we're starting there, and via this isiXhosa Foundation, which Catherine mentioned, it was started STEAM Foundation. We've been introduced to their South American CREA department. So isiXhosa has a different organization that operates in the Spanish-speaking world of South America.
Mhm.
And again, it's a slow process to get everybody changing. These
Mhm.
K-12 administrations have been doing things the same way for many, many years all over the world. So getting them to do it differently
Mhm.
takes. So all the promotion you can help us with, Alan, we'll appreciate.
I'm trying, but like,
Yeah.
what kind of things would you need, or what should people do if they're interested in this?
I think begin talking about it for one thing. The other thing is at the higher ed level, where lots of people who are going to hear this presentation first are going to say, well, okay, so what should we do? Let's go over to the education department.
Mhm.
We train teachers
Mhm.
and ask them if they know about OER, and ask the people in the education departments if they're showing teachers how to use OER.
Mhm.
That would be the first thing.
Mhm.
What I've found is that the answer is going to be, for the most part, not really. Maybe not.
Yeah, hard to say. Like,
Well,
Yeah.
I'll say not really. I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be that in most education departments.
And I did an analysis of research that was done by JET Education Services during the pandemic of what was available for South African students. And it was a vanishingly rare, a tiny, tiny set. Yes, you've got African Storybook, you've got Siavula, you've got Thunderbolts Kids, but that's pretty much it. You run out. So you've got a lot of stuff there that's simply not available. So there's, and again, STEAM has a traditional focus on science. So there is some material out there, but there's a huge amount of material that isn't out there. And so part of it is just to try and get people, I think people, and I'm working on OER policy with universities as well. And what I find is that people see it as giving. And they don't realize that they can also take, that there's a reciprocity. You're not merely giving what you create, but you also are able to jumpstart. You're able to get into a place where, I was working on policy and I was saying, here, I've got all these policies from the Commonwealth of Learning. We can jumpstart this whole process. We're not starting from, okay, clause 1. We've got 10 policies here that are open education resources that we can work with. So there is a whole marketing, and I think, there's this red herring of, it's less quality. Believe you me, if you're trying to put something out and you know that it can be, you're going to be a lot more worried about what it looks like than if you're simply running it in a school or so on. So I think part of it is just to shift that and to shift the fear, because it's relatively easy to put something up on an LMS if you've got the content. But if you don't have the content, you first have to develop the content and then you put it onto the LMS, So I think that is one thing. The other challenge that I have been working with very much because of my history in development is we actually are now working with a cellular manufacturer, or they're South African based, they're throughout Africa, but they are looking at creating for us as large and robust a device as possible, but one without any cellular capability. Because I know from working with the Siemens Stiftung funded organizations in South America that the provision of devices is a real problem in terms of theft. So we've got a whole lot of other challenges we are looking at in terms of trying to make sure that the devices are not known to be, that that you can't turn it into a cell phone, for instance. And then the other thing we have looked at as well is if you do provide the devices, make sure you provide the power banks and so on, but that we are looking at switching profiles. So you don't necessarily need a device a child, but a device a grade, and the students can switch profiles. So there are quite a lot of those kinds of things that I think we think of within our context, and I know that the South American context is very similar in terms of poverty and the associated theft, which again, if you if you're living in West Germany, you don't think about, because it's a small amount. But I mean, the devices, I mean, we're looking at the devices are coming in at around about 10% of the volume, because again, that is the solution that Africa needs. So yes, so those are the kinds of because yes, the last thing, yes, there's always the give you money, but I know in the intelligence community they say no, it's the analysis, it's the understanding. The money is the last thing. You need to have solved the problem first. And I think for me it would be getting people to be a lot more consistent about licensing education materials in K-12 as OER, and not just automatically copywriting them, because then you've got a lot of resources you can utilize.
And I'll just add into that what Catherine is saying as far as changing the mindsets. We're already spending, when I say we, I mean globally, education. We're already spending the money. It's not a matter of sustainability. It's a matter of changing the flow of the money. We're already spending lots of money, more money than we need to. Actually, the money should be diverted to creating the OER books and the teacher professional development. That's one thing. So it's just a shift in that some people think, well, it'll cost too much. No, it's not a cost. It's a shift of the focus of the money. The other big thing of thinking that needs to change, I think, is in K-12, we need an LMS. We need, or an LMS like, and if we would also like it to be open source. That's why we promote Moodle, because it is an LMS and it's open source. And again, from a higher ed perspective, it's like, well, why do we need an LMS? Well, because when we're talking about K-12, we need to assess very frequently. You noticed I showed you that quiz where we show a question and then we give them a prompt, we give them feedback, we see if they got it right. As an elementary teacher, you're assessing all day long, and that's very different from higher ed, where traditionally a lecturer lectures all day long, and then they assess 2 or 3 times a year at the end of the semester. Well, when you're an elementary teacher, you're assessing as they come in the door and as they're leaving. So that's why the LMS helps with that part of the instructional process.
All right, so we need to encourage the development of many more OE artists out there, and so I really appreciate so much taking time out to bring this to us, and we hope we can get some more people interested in this fantastic work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yes.
And this of course, the same link to watch this is now the recording, so this is available for sharing right away. And just thank you again.
Fantastic.
And we hope we can keep this going.
Thanks, Alan.
Sure.
Excellent.
Stay cool, Kat.
Thank you so much.